Hey guys, welcome back to Exclusive Tutorials YouTube channel. This is Dr. Beth and I am your fun tutor. So today we're going to be looking at autonomic pharmacology. I know most of you watch class videos only when you want to write exam, right? But trust me, I'm your fun tutor and I'm making my teachings in a way that you can always work my teachings even when you are bored, even when you need to feel happy, not just when you want to write exam. So it's pharmacology for fun. Now we're going to be looking at muscarinic receptors under autonomic pharmacology. Now, before we move straight to muscarinic receptors, we need to talk about what is a receptor, right? What is a receptor before we talk about muscarinic receptors. Now, when we talk about receptors, we'll talk about receptors are those structures in the cell surface. Now, let's say, for example, receptors are structures in the cell surface. What they do is that they bind to specific substances and carry out specific effects. Specific substances, they don't just bind to anyhow substance, they bind to some specific substances and carry out some specific effect. Now, let's look at this. Let's say, for example, okay, now let me explain a receptor. Let's say this is our, let's assume this to be our cell surface. This is a cell, right? And let's assume that we have this as a receptor. Let's assume that we have this as a receptor, right? Now, this is the cell surface, this is a receptor. Now, a receptor binds is a structure in the cell surface that binds to a particular substance. Let's say we have a substance like this. Let's say we have two substances, a substance like this and a substance like this, right? Now, if this is a receptor, then the substance needs to bind here. Remember when I talk about specificity, between this structure and this structure, which one do you think can enter here? You know this one is bigger than this, right? Why this one is the same size as this? So if anyone can enter, it is this brother that will enter here. So this receptor can only bind to this guy. This guy cannot bind to this guy, so this receptor cannot bind to this guy. So there's structures in the body of a cell or in the surface of a cell that binds to specific substances and carry out specific effects. Now, what relationship has receptors and drug? When I'm talking about relationship, I'm not talking about you and your babe. Now I'm talking about receptors and drug in pharmacology. Now, there's a video I made on introduction to pharmacology where I introduced basic terms in pharmacology. I made us to understand in that video that drugs don't just carry out an effect, right? Before drug carries out an effect, they bind to receptors. It's a receptor that is specific to them. So when they bind to that receptor, they carry out their pharmacological effect. Now let me give you an illustration explaining a receptor. Now when you are using a phone, this is your phone, right? Let me come closer so that I see it. This is your phone. Don't love my phone because I'll break your head. This one is more expensive than you. Now this is my phone, but this phone cannot work without a SIM card, right? I cannot make call with this phone if there's no SIM on this phone. Let's assume the phone is my body and the SIM is my drug. Now, let's open the phone. Let me show you something. When I open this phone, right? You remember there is a SIM here. Now, the fact that this SIM cannot work, the phone cannot make call without a SIM, I need to put the SIM inside the phone. But when I just put my SIM anywhere, the SIM cannot work because the fact that the SIM has to be in the phone, there is a specific place that the SIM has to be, which is the SIM port. So which means, for example, this SIM port is the receptor, the SIM is the drug, and the phone is my body. Now, let's say, for example, if I bring in a memory card to come and put into this SIM port, it's not going to work because this port is only made for SIM and not for memory card. Now, here's a space that is made for memory card. If I put SIM here, it's not going to work. Remember I told you that receptors are specific, which is to let you know that this SIM port is exactly like a receptor. It is specific. It does not just carry anyhow thing, and it carries out its effect. So once this thing is here, you can use it to make call. You cannot play music with the SIM. So it has a specific function and it binds to specific things. Why is my mind telling me that one day somebody will write in the exam hall that Dr. Beth said that a receptor is a symport? Please, Ebuka, don't try me. I never told you that a receptor is a symport. I'm just giving an illustration, and it's better you get it. Now let's proceed. Muscarinic receptors. They are G protein. They are G protein coupled receptors. Right? These are G protein coupled receptors. Now, muscarinic receptors are activated, are stimulated, they lead to the formation of phospholipase C, right? Activation. So they activate phospholipase C when stimulated. Now, this activation of phospholipase C leads to increased formation of inositol. Inositol triphosphates and diacylglycerol. So increased formation. We said that muscarinic receptors are G protein coupled receptors that when stimulated they activate phospholipase C, which leads to the increased formation of inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. Leads to mobilization of intracellular mobilization. Just follow this process, you're going to understand it. Now, muscarinic receptors, so they are G protein coupled receptors. Like when stimulated, activates phospholipase C. This activation of phospholipase C leads to increased formation of inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol, which leads to mobilization of intracellular calcium. Now, what we have explained here is for three types of muscarinic receptors, and we have M1, M3, and M5. On the other hand, they can cause inhibition of adenylyl cyclase, right? Now, the inhibition of adenylyl cyclase leads to reduction in cyclic AMP. Now, what is cyclic AMP? Cyclic AMP means adenosine monophosphate. Cyclic adenosine monophosphate, right? Activation of potassium ion channel. Or inhibition of calcium ion channel. So the one we just explained now is for M2 and M5. Now, in summary, what we are trying to explain that muscarinic receptors work in two different ways. One is when muscarinic receptors are stimulated, right, they activate phospholipase C. Now, the activation of phospholipase C will lead to increase in formation of inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. Now, which will lead to mobilization of calcium channels from the cells, right? Now, on the other hand, that first one is for M1, M3, and M5. On the other hand, when muscarinic receptors are stimulated, right, they lead to the inhibition of adenylate cyclase. Then the inhibition of adenylate cyclase leads to reduction in cyclic AMP, and the reduction in cyclic AMP will lead to activation of potassium ion channel or even reduction or inhibition of calcium ion channel. Now let me put this in a formulation or in a table where we can understand. So we have muscarinic receptors M1, M3, M5, and we have M2, M4, right? For M1, M3, and M5, you're going to have activation of phospholipase C, which will lead to increased formation of IP3, which is inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. Then which will lead to, remember, everything here is increasing calcium, mobilization of calcium ion channel. Then for M2 and M4, you are going to have reduction of adenylate cyclase, so which will lead to reduction of cyclic AMP, increase in potassium ion channel, but reduction in calcium ion channel. Now we have talked about so many things. We have talked about phospholipase C, IP3, DAG. We have talked about adenylate cyclase. We have talked about cyclic AMP. Now let's explain all these terms so that you can understand what they mean in details. Or let's explain phospholipase C. What's phospholipase C? Because it's not good to just mention a term that you do not understand. Now, phospholipase C is an enzyme that catalyzes the conversion of inositol 4,5 bisphosphates to inositol triphosphates. Remember when we are talking about receptors, we told you to understand that they are G protein coupled receptors which, when stimulated, activate phospholipase C, leading to increased information of inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol. Now, what this enzyme does, we said that phospholipase C is an enzyme. It catalyzes the conversion of this inositol 4,5 bisphosphates to inositol triphosphate and DAG, diacylglycerol. So which means without this enzyme, inositol 4,5 bisphosphates will not be converted to inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol, right? Now, these two things, when this conversion happens, it is this inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol that will increase the mobilization of calcium channels from the cells, or mobilization of calcium from the storage cells. Now, what is inositol triphosphate and diacylglycerol? IP3 and DAG. Now let's talk about IP3 and DAG. But before we talk about that, let's talk about second messengers. Because IP3 is a second messenger, but before we talk about it, we should understand what second messengers are all about. Now, second messengers are molecules in the body which are responsible for signal transduction. So what do they do when we say they are responsible for signal transduction? They carry signals from cell surface of target organs to effector organs. Now let's say, for example, okay, let me just write. They relay signals from cell surface of target molecules to effector organs. Now, what do we mean? For example, let me use the popular web browser that we know. Let's say, for example, Google. Google as a web browser does not have an information on its own. What Google holds is that, let's say, for example, I want to search who is the richest man in the world. Google carries the information from the site that has it. Let's say the stuff was posted on a site like Amazon or on Facebook. Google carries this information from the site that has it. Now, this site that has it is the target molecule, right, to effector organs, and brings it to my screen. So Google in this sense is acting as a second messenger. It does not have any information of its own. It does not have any effect on its own, but it's in between. It relays information or signals from the target organs to effector molecules or effector organs, the organs that will carry out the effect. So example of these second messengers are IP3, we have CAMP, etc. Now, we talked about inositotriphosphate, IP3, when we are talking about phospholipase C. So since phospholipase C is going to increase the formation of IP3 by converting inosito 4,5-bisphosphate to IP3 and DAG. What is now the function of IP3 and DAG? Now, what IP3 do is to increase or enhances the mobilization of calcium ion or calcium ion from the storage organs, right? So once IP3 is activated, there is an increase of calcium ion in the body. Same thing as DAG. DAG helps to increase activation of protein kinase C. Let's take it like this. IP3, calcium ion, DAG, protein kinase C. Now we have talked about for M1, M3, and M5. I'll talk about phospholipase C, talk about what second messengers are, talk about IP3, DAG, and the rest. Now, on the other hand, we talked about that they can inhibit the formation of adenylyl cyclase. Now, just like we made us to understand that phospholipase C is an enzyme, adenylyl cyclase is also an enzyme that converts ATP, adenosine triphosphate, to cyclic AMP. Remember that cyclic AMP is the second messenger, just like the other one. Inosito triphosphate is the second messenger. So adenylyl cyclase is an enzyme that converts ATP, adenosine triphosphate, to cyclic AMP. Now, what is now the function of cyclic AMP? Cyclic AMP, just like I told you, is a second messenger that is responsible for a lot of signal transduction in the body. It's responsible for many processes in the body. It does this by activating protein kinase A. So CAMP, protein kinase A. Remember, we talked about DAG as protein kinase C. So CAMP is protein kinase A. Let's do a recap. Now we talked about, first of all, begin by talking about receptors. I will say that receptors are structures in the body that binds to specific substances and carry out specific effects. Now we'll talk about muscarinic receptors as G protein coupled receptors, which when stimulated activates protein phospholipase C, which when stimulated activates phospholipase C. Now we'll say that this phospholipase C is an enzyme that converts inositol 4,5-bisphosphate to inositol trisphosphate and diacylglycerol. I made us to understand that inositol trisphosphate is a second messenger, right? That when this inositol trisphosphate is there, it mobilizes the activation of calcium ion channel, which leads to the production of more calcium or mobilization of calcium from the calcium storage organs, right? Now, on the other hand, we'll also talk about muscarinic receptors that can lead to inhibition of adenylyl cyclase. Now, adenylyl cyclase is supposed to convert ATP, adenosine triphosphate, to cyclic AMP, cyclic adenosine monophosphate. So when this process is inhibited, there will be no enough cyclic AMP, so there will be reduction in cyclic AMP, and this reduction in cyclic AMP is going to lead to activation of potassium ion channel or inhibition of calcium ion channel, and we have explained all these things. Now let's look into the various muscarinic receptors that we have. Now we have 5 major muscarinic receptors: M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. Now, where are these receptors found? Where are these receptors found? Now, let's take this structure, right? Now, this is a human being. Don't mind my drawing. I'm very bad at drawing. I think I'm drawing Kelechi. Kelechi, this is your head. If you are watching this video, this Kelechi. This is Neckar's hand. This is the chest. Wow. Kelechi looks so fine. Okay, let's assume that this is Kelechi. Now, M1 receptors are found in the CNS, central nervous system, right? In the central nervous system. M2 receptors are found in the heart. M3 receptors are found in other parts of the body. So we are not going to be talking about M4 and M5. So we are focused on there's not much has been said about M4 and M5, but we're focused on M1, M2, and M3. Remember, this is your body. So from up, 1, 2, 3 all over your body. 1, CNS. 2, heart. 3, other part of your body. So this is Kelechi. M1 receptors are found in the central nervous system of Kelechi's body. M2 receptors are found in Kelechi's heart. M3 receptors are found in other parts of the body. Now let's look at the effect of stimulation of muscarinic receptors in various parts of the body. Hope you're enjoying the class. First of all, let's begin with the heart. We made us to understand that the muscarinic receptor found in the heart is the M2 receptors, right? When M2 receptors in the heart are stimulated, it causes decreased heartbeat, right? Decreased heartbeat. So when muscarinic receptors, M2 receptors in the heart are stimulated, there's going to be a decrease in heartbeat, which can lead to bradycardia. Now let's talk about the eye. Now in the eye, we're going to take several effects. The receptors found in the eye are actually M3 receptors, just like I made you to understand that M2 receptors are in the heart, M1 in the CNS, while M3 are in other parts of the body. Now, when muscarinic receptors in the eye are stimulated in the eye, first of all, let's talk about in the eye. We're going to consider some parts of the eye. Now, let's talk about the pupil. When they are stimulated in the pupil, it's going to cause pupil contraction. It's going to lead to contraction, which we can call miosis, right? So it's going to lead to contraction, which we can call miosis, contraction of the pupil. Now, one more thing we want us to talk about is that also in the eye, when muscarinic receptors are stimulated, there's what we call Screm's canal. Now, this is there's a fluid we call aqueous humor in the eye. Now, when the aqueous humor in the eye is drained through the Screm's canal, now when there is a stimulation of muscarinic receptors in the eye, it is going to increase the size of the Screm's canal. It's going to increase the size, which will lead to increase in the removal of the aqueous humor. So it's going to cause decreased aqueous humor. Yeah, it's going to cause a decreased aqueous humor. Now let's talk about the GIT. When muscarinic receptors are stimulated in the GIT, it's going to lead to increased peristalsis. Increased peristalsis. The rate at which your food are digested are going to increase, and also the rate at which the rate at which food are digested is going to increase, which can actually lead to diarrhea. It can cause diarrhea where you start passing out stools regularly, watery stools regularly. So increase of muscarinic receptors is going to lead to increased peristalsis. Stimulation of muscarinic receptors is going to cause increased peristalsis. Now let's talk about the kidney. Now when muscarinic receptors are stimulated in the kidney, it's going to cause contraction. It's going to cause contraction of detrusor muscle. Now, this contraction of detrusor muscle is going to cause what we call voiding of kidney. So it's going to cause voiding of kidney. So the rate at which you pass out urine is going to increase when muscarinic receptors are stimulated in the kidney. Now, in the airways, it's going to cause bronchocontraction. So it's going to lead to contraction of the airways, which means a stimulation of muscarinic receptors is not good for an asthma patient who already is suffering from bronchocontraction. So a stimulation of muscarinic receptors is going to cause bronchoconstriction in the airways. Now let's talk about sweat gland. It's going to cause increased sweat. Increased sweating, or you can say increased sweat secretion. So the rate at which sweat are secreted is going to be increased with muscarinic receptors. So stimulation of muscarinic receptors in the skin is going to cause increased sweating. Now let's talk about lacrimal gland in the eye. It's going to cause increased tear formation. So there will be increased tear formation. So you, Angela, that used to cry so often, when anything happens to you, you start crying. So probably there's an increased muscarinic stimulation in your system, or probably you can imagine you that used to cry every day. When then you take a substance, let's say muscarine, that increases the stimulation of muscarinic receptors in your lacrimal gland. Oh, you just start crying like there's no tomorrow. So I want you to take note of everything we have discussed, starting from receptors, talk about muscarinic receptors and everything about muscarinic receptors, and make sure you take notes. This will actually help you having an idea of what the location of your M1, M2, M3, M4, M5. Now let's go through something that you are going to see. Now if you check muscarinic receptors in your heart, apart from your heart that is causing bradycardia, right? In almost all parts of your body, it causes, especially those parts of your body that has to do with secretion, your secretory organs, it causes increased secretion in most of these places. In your sweat gland, your lacrimal gland, it causes an increased secretion. You can also check out your GIT, it causes increased peristalsis. So, if you forget anything, let's say for example an example, and you cannot actually remember the function of the muscarinic receptors in this organ, just remember that I said in organs of secretion, most organs of secretion, it causes increased secretion. So when you remember tear gland, your mind will just tell you increased secretion of tears. Your sweat gland, your mind will tell you that it increased sweating. Your GIT increased peristalsis. So just have in mind that anything that has to do with secretion, it increases. You can also check your kidney, volume of kidney, increasing of how frequent you urinate. So for those of you that used to urinate so often, don't take any substance that is going to increase secretion of muscarinic receptors in your kidney. Now this is the end of this video. In the other video, we're going to be talking about muscarinic agonists and antagonists. We're going to talk about drugs or substances that increases the stimulation of muscarinic receptors and the pharmacology of those drugs. Don't forget, on this channel, we teach pharmacology, pharmaceutical chemistry, biology, and chemistry. Always make sure you are on this platform. And don't forget, you can send us special thank you through you can see where it says special thanks. Just feel free to send us special thanks if you appreciate what we do. Until we meet again, don't forget, in everything you do, give your best to it, for only then will you be happy with yourself. I'm Dr. Bez and I say thank you and God bless you. Hey, before you leave, subscribe to this channel if I blow you now. Bye.